Good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar on uncovering the truth about the internet, taking a deep dive into the dark web. My name is Ian Evans. I'm the president and CEO of eTech. I will be your host for the webinar today. I would also like to introduce Katie Wallace and Will Bishop from ID Agent, our subject matter experts. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. All attendees have been put on listen-only mode. This webinar will be recorded. We will be sending a link of the recording within 48 hours. We will also have a question and answer after the presentation. You can submit your questions in the chat window. If there are any problems with the presentation, please let us know also in the chat window. So who is eTech? eTech is a turnkey managed services provider. We have been around since 2005. Some of the services that we provide: system support and IT consulting, cybersecurity audits, network and security assessments, and penetration testing. Cybersecurity awareness training. We can do training for your staff, your board, and even your members, volunteers, and customers, of course. We offer data protection services, including intelligent business continuity and disaster recovery services. eTech are experts when it comes to web hosting, web design, and development, and website security. We also provide IMIS consulting, IMIS hosting, and IMIS maintenance. IMIS is the #1 platform in the world for member engagement. And of course, we have partnered with ID Agent to offer dark web monitoring. Why should we care about cybercrime? What happens when your credentials gets breached? Personally, I grew up in the 80s. My favorite shows that I used to watch were a lot of cop shows. I used to watch a lot of Miami Vice in the 80s, and of course CSI Miami in the 90s. Even though the bad guys would always get caught, they always glorified the bad guys. They were usually drug lords. They had the best cars. They had lots of money. They were always on the water. So when I watched these shows, being a bad guy was really cool. Well, even having said that, well, a lot of that changed in 2014. Cybercrime is now the most lucrative criminal activity for revenue in the world, and this gap is only widening. Even though drug lords usually get caught, but rarely do the bad actors, the hackers. It's rare that they get caught. And if they do get caught, we find a lot of times they get hired. Certain crimes, you have to be a certain type of person, literally have a criminal mind, but not with cybercrime. Even we hear a lot about ransomware. Ransomware as a service today is actually mainstream. There are many sites on the web, even the dark web, which we're going to learn a lot about today, where you can just go on a site and create your own ransomware and send that to any person you feel like, as long as you have their email. Hackers just say, and if hackers get caught, all they say is that it's my fee for providing a cybersecurity service for detection and recovery. So every day we see something on successful attacks against businesses, large and small. But some of the major attacks over the last couple of years, of course, everyone has a Facebook account, and everyone is familiar with Facebook. Facebook had a breach of September 2019. Several unprotected databases were found online containing the phone numbers of Facebook users, as well as in some cases their name, gender, and country. If I scroll through this list, I'm going to hover over Desjardins Group, where 2.9 million. This was just June of last year. An employee of a financial services federation, Desjardins Group, leaked personal details of more than 2.9 million people and 173,000 businesses. There's a lot here. Here's another one, Toyota. Just right there, just a Toyota, 3.1 million, as this was April 2019. Customers may have been leaked following a security breach of multiple Toyota and Lexus sales subsidiaries. Everyone, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Capital One breach. This occurred of August of 2019, July of 2019, where a former Amazon employee was arrested in relation to the hack. We're talking about over 100 million people in the US and 6 million in Canada. What was exposed? We're talking about social insurance number, credit card scores, personal and financial information, date of birth, and full names. There's definitely a lot on this list. Another one was Marriott hotels, whereby 383 million, and this just occurred a few months ago as of in November, where sensitive data on customers was leaked. So credit card details and of course personal information. And the last one that I'd just like to bring up is the Equifax, which occurred of September of 2017. This is also a very scary one, of course, because it's pretty much all our financial information that we would need in order to secure credit. So throughout this list, Microsoft is on here, Instagram, Twitter, and even LinkedIn. So all our social media accounts have also been breached. We've seen quite a few breaches over the last couple of weeks, definitely in Canada and the USA. We learned about the city of New Orleans. They suffered a cyber attack serious enough for the mayor, Latoya Cantrell, to declare a state of emergency. The attack occurred on Friday, December 13th, 2019. That's just a couple months ago, as I said. And the attack was a result of a phishing attack. Just last week, I heard about MGM. It was announced that they were the victim of a ransomware attack, whereby 10 million users who stayed at the MGM resorts, hotels, credentials have been published right on the dark web. Besides details of regular tourists, personal details including leaked files, and also personal and contact details of celebrities, tech CEOs, reporters, government officials, and employees of some of the world's largest tech companies were compromised. What was exposed? Full name, home address, phone number, emails, date of birth, and also credit card information. And also, right in Saskatchewan, the eHealth Saskatchewan was just recently hit with a ransomware attack just in January of 2020. Even though there is no proof that data was stolen, their systems were shut down for days and it took weeks to recover. eHealth Saskatchewan is a company that manages electronic records for the province's health authority. And just the last breach that I'd just like to show you is Life Labs. Anyone familiar with Life Labs who lives who's from Canada, of course? Just December 2019, 15 million Canadians were impacted by cyber attack. The two provinces that were impacted the most were mostly BC and Ontario. Life Labs is one of Canada's largest medical laboratories. So customer information that could include name, address, email, logins, passwords, date of birth, health card numbers, gender, phone number, password security questions, and lab test results, all from 2016. And in this case, Life Labs did pay the ransom, but it is undisclosed how much they paid. So this is leading up to ID agent and what happens with all these credentials. So I've talked about hundreds of millions of compromised emails that are on the dark web today. So what I would like to do is pass over our presentation to Will Bishop from ID agent. Will?
Sure. Thank you very much, Ian. I appreciate you having us, Katie and I, on the call today. So, to speak to the slide here, who is ID Agent? So, ID Agent is a company that was formed out of necessity through a breach that happened at the Office of Personnel Management. And what it is that we provide is monitoring of the dark web. And kind of what we're going to talk through today is, one, let's understand what the dark web is in relation to the internet as a whole, and we'll talk about that in some slides that are coming up. but also how it is that your credentials end up out there on the dark web, and then and what you can do about it. And what we really want to achieve today is, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty and doubt that is definitely involved with the whole concept of the dark web. But what we want to do is provide some education, give you some knowledge about what's going on with the space, what the space is, and through that knowledge, allow you to take control of what's happening with your credentials in regards to the dark web, and make some good decisions about that, and take control back. So as I was mentioning, Dark Web ID was founded when there was a breach at the Office of Personnel Management. If you have the interest and you've not taken a look, that's a very interesting breach to go take a look at. But basically, what happened was, in response to that breach, our founder, our CEO, Kevin Lancaster, was the project lead for the response to that. And as they began to do the forensic investigation and go through what happened there, it became evident that one exposed credential had been used to enter the network, and had potentially exposed over 1 million other government employees in the process. And so they needed a tool to go out and check and see who was exposed, whose credentials were exposed on the dark web. And that was created. That tool was created, and that's the genesis of ID Agent. Now, as they took that particular breach and they put the information into our tool, they discovered that another almost 800,000 employees of the federal government were exposed in that breach. And so they were able to, at that point, turn around and take action on that. But that tool, I want to tell you just a little bit about that. And our founding, we are an enterprise class tool, but we also scale down to be available to businesses of all sizes, and we are obtainable and achievable through all those different size organizations. So that's a little bit about us. Ian, if you would advance the slide, I'm going to talk just a little bit about the internet as a whole. So you'll see the graphic that we've got here on the left of the iceberg. And you've seen this graphic to illustrate all kinds of different things, I'm sure, but it's a really good fit for what we want to talk about today. So as we look at our graphic over there, you'll notice that we've got the tip, so the piece that's out of the water there, and that's going to represent what we call surface web. And this is the internet, or the space on the internet that we know. So we can search this with Safari, we can search this with Google. We find results, on all kinds of different topics that we're interested in. And this portion of the internet is indexed, and we can search it. The indexing is what allows us to search it. And as a whole, this part of the internet represents about 4% of the entirety. If we look at everything that's out there on the internet, this is a very small portion, again, about 4%. So this is the internet we know. If we move down in our graphic there, below the water level, we'll come into what we know to be the deep web. And the deep web is going to be the bulk of actually what is present on the internet. I've heard estimates as high as 90% of what's actually out on the internet is here in deep web. And so characteristics of deep web are this content is not indexed, so we can't just pull up a browser and search this. Or nobody can just search this in general. You have to be directed to it, know how to connect to it. Oftentimes, it exists behind a login and a password, so a set of credentials. Great examples of this and what's going on in this space would be your bank account information. So that's information that we don't want to have just easily accessed or easily searched by just anyone that might like to take a look at it. So, again, you'll go to your banking site, you log in, you'll gain access to it. Your movie queue in Netflix would be another good example here. There are government applications here. I know military they'll transfer troop movements, standard operating procedure updates, things like that. Universities that are doing research may share that research between themselves or with the government or whoever in this space. So you can see quickly you've got large amounts of information here, and how this space, this deep web space, makes up such a large component of what's on the internet as a whole. Now, the space that we're interested in and we're kind of setting the stage for is the dark web. And that's, again, another small piece of the internet as a whole, but it's down here at the bottom, and some characteristics of this space is it's not indexed, again, and it's also, when you access this space, it's done anonymously. So we don't know who you are, we don't know what you're doing, where you've been, that type of thing. And there are legitimate applications for this. one that jumps to mind right away would be free speech. There's areas of the world where you're not allowed to express your opinions, you're not allowed to look at Facebook, things like that. And people in those areas, again, through the anonymity and connecting and not knowing who you are, they can connect here. They can express themselves. There are versions of Facebook that exist here for those folks, things like that. Also, drop boxes at major news outlets. They all have one here, and you can use this space to if you have a whistleblower, they can leave information here without fear of reprisal. So you kind of understand what the space is, and the reason we're interested in it as a business owner or someone that's interested in running a business is this is where the market exists for stolen credentials. So when you see a breach, Equifax, Lowe's, Target, any of the ones that come to your mind perhaps that have been in the news that rang a bell for you, when the people that have perpetrated those acts and have that information want to sell it or they just want to share it, this is where they come to do that. So as you kind of put the pieces together, you can see right away that there's definitely a benefit to being able to know what's going on down in this space so that you can get reactively proactive, if you will, and get in the middle of that attack chain and change credentials before someone else has an opportunity to use those against you in a malicious manner. So that's the space, and that's kind of what's going on. I'd like to share an actual snapshot from the dark web to kind of give you a little bit of insight into what that looks like. And so I know it's probably hard to read on your screen, but in the black verbiage, it kind of describes what's happening with this site. So the people that own and operate this site are selling credit cards, and they're not sending you a list, a spreadsheet or something like that with credit card numbers. They're actually going to press the card and they're going to send it to you via FedEx. It'll be in an unmarked box, and your neighbors won't know what's going on. And they're telling you in there that they've read both stripes of the card, so they know what the daily cash advance limit is. They know what the 4-digit PIN code is if you want to use it in an ATM. They know what the 3-digit code on the back is. They know everything about it. So you can take this, and the prices are such that you can make money with it. You're not going to pay as much as the daily cash advance limit is. So if you've got the wherewithal and your moral compass is maybe not pointing just exactly north, it's an opportunity to go out and make some money. So you can see why people are intrigued by this and why people want to get involved with this. The other thing I would point out, and we've got it highlighted there in the blue, is they run this very much like a business. They're verbalizing, thank you for the chance to provide you with the best credit cards. And they also go on in there to guarantee the quality of their product. If you're not happy, they'll get you your money back. They'll get you replacement cards, whatever it takes to keep you happy and to keep you coming back as a customer, they're willing to do. So again, just wanted to share this little screenshot from the dark web to kind of illustrate, hey, this is a real business, and it's being ran that way. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Katie Wallace, and let her talk just a little bit about how it is that your credentials come to be exposed on the dark web.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Will. I mean, it's crazy to think everything that is happening out on the internet and how big of a space that the dark web truly is. But like Will mentioned, what I'm here to talk about today is how your data winds up there. First and foremost,
Hi everyone. I think we're having technical difficulty. We're not able to hear Katie.
Hey Ian, this is Will. Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, Will.
Okay, I'm going to pick up for Katie. I'm not sure what happened. My audio disconnected as well. I apologize for the interruption there. So basically, what Katie was going to cover was the different ways that your data can become exposed. So phishing is one that people are probably fairly familiar with. That's when you've got bad actors that are sending emails in that are disguised as legitimate messages, and they're very clever. They're very very well done at this point. You can buy kits that allow you to create that ransomware on the fly, or the phishing email rather, on the fly as you go, and you can make those look very very convincing and very very realistic. The other thing that you'll see is malvertising that she's got listed there on the slide, and that's basically when you've got a legitimate site. U.S.A. Today or maybe somebody like that would be good examples of those. And you get bad actors that will come in and set up online ads on those sites that actually contain malware. And they come in, they're very clever, they're very well disguised. It often is the case that they're discovered by the people that are running the website, but it usually takes time for that to happen. And in the meanwhile, people do click on it and they do have their credentials exposed that way. Watering holes is another example that she's got up here. That's just where they, again, target popular sites, social media sites, corporate intranets, things like that. And again, they're inserting malware into real websites and capturing credentials. As you log into legitimate sites, those credentials are being captured on the back end. And the last thing that got mentioned here. Hey, Katie, are you back?
I was able to reconnect, and sorry everybody, I was having audio issues. Will, if you don't mind, I can take things from here.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So like Will mentioned, the last thing that we want to talk about, how your data gets on the dark web here, is through web attacks and data breaches. It seems like, stories of massive data breaches pop up in the news. I know Ian walked us through some of the biggest data breaches that happened in 2019 and 2018. A data breach is an incident that exposes confidential or protected information. A data breach might involve, the loss or the theft of your social security number, your banking or credit information, personal health information, and even passwords and email addresses. A data breach can be intentional or accidental, unfortunately. A cybercriminal may hack the database of a company where you've shared your personal information. I mean, think about how many websites that you log into with an email address and a password. Or, an employee at a company may accidentally expose your information on the internet, potentially by clicking on a link in a phishing email or falling susceptible to a malvertisement that's floating around on the dark web. But either way, cyber criminals may access your key information through exposures like those. A leading cause of business data breaches are the use of, default or weak passwords. An astonishing 81% of company data breaches are due to passwords, according to the 2018 Verizon breach investigation report. I mean, something we have to consider is think about how many passwords that you may reuse from one website to another. And if one of those websites gets breached, the cyber criminal now has access to both accounts. But as we move forward, I want to talk about what happens after one of these data breaches or phishing attacks. Remember hearing about the WannaCry virus? I think that was something we heard about in the media a few years ago. It was a virus that targeted computers running on Microsoft Windows operating system. And what the cybercriminal did was encrypt data, and then they demanded some sort of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency payment to receive the data back. This was a pretty notorious virus that went around, but not all attacks have to be as notorious as the WannaCry virus to take an entire company down. And unfortunately, most ransomware attacks do not have a happy ending. Ransomware and data breaches are a huge security problem for any size organization. According to another quarterly report, 64% of malicious emails sent used ransomware to obtain data outside of just phishing for information. Unfortunately, all data has a price tag on the dark web, as Will showed us. Folks run businesses down there. As we advance the slide, I want to talk about how your customers are the #1 target. Companies serving customers have the responsibility to keep their data safe. You have the responsibility to keep private information secure. And in a lot of times that's an expectation, and in some cases, the law. So when personal information is compromised, customers, they rightly feel violated. Ultimately, a company's failure to protect a customer's private information can and will live in forever in the age of the internet, unfortunately, which can definitely bruise a company's reputation. For small to medium-sized businesses, it's not just about the reputation, but data breaches, they can be costly. They can be financially draining. On average, a data breach causes a company 7 days worth of downtime. Loss of private data outside of downtime can also lead to massive fines by authorities. If it's not a HIPAA violation, you have to think about the GDPR, and Canada has their regulations, and a lot of states within the U.S. are moving towards such regulatory regulations. Such fines can also be financially devastating as well from the HIPAA or GDPR. A study found that 65% of data breach victims lost trust in an organization as a result of a breach. The IDC found that between 60 and 70% of consumers will actually defect from a business if their information is compromised in a security breach. Imagine trying to do business on 30% of your book after you just had, a week's worth of downtime and you had to pay a fine on top of that. All of this can be devastating for a business. But good news, as I turn things back over to Ian, I'll let him kind of walk through what can be done about stolen credentials, or what you can do to be alerted about this information winding up in the wrong hands.
Thank you very much, Katie. A lot of my clients ask me, we support a lot of small to medium-sized business, and what are the chances of a breach? And really, we have no control, because if our credentials end up on a third-party site that gets compromised, then we have no control of that if it ends up on the dark web. The best thing we can do as an organization, and this is where we work very closely with ID Agent, is to alert our customers immediately that their credentials, that could be anyone in their organization, from a board member to any staff, the president and CEO, or any staff, that their credentials are on the dark web. And not only that, their passwords are also tied to those credentials. And in many cases, we find that a lot of organizations just don't have strong password policies. So we see many times that a password is actually password or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the end user is also making it very easy for the bad actors to, gain access to their credentials. Special Counsel Robert Mueller, the reason why we put this slide up here, Robert Mueller investigated President Trump for his involvement with the Russian government regarding the 2016 U.S. election. And what he's saying is very clear, that he is convinced that there are only two types of companies: those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. That's scary. He's saying every company will eventually get hacked, and even they are converging into one category: companies that have been hacked and unfortunately will be hacked again. So how prepared are we going to be is definitely the question. We asked Katie just to pull a report of all the companies that are on this webinar right now. And this total, 10,467. I was quite shocked when I saw this, but what we did, we scanned all the different companies and personal email domains that are registered for this webinar, and we found a total of 10,467 compromised email address on the dark web. We're just, in terms of how many companies are on this webinar, it's in the 30s, and we're looking at over 10,000 email on the dark web. This is why we offer this service. If any one of these credentials shows up, we will advise you immediately. Just before we wrap up, we are offering a promotion today. Usually we charge about, I think it's about $100 a month to monitor the dark web for our clients. And we have a discount that is going on right now, where free dark web monitoring for 3 months. So anyone on the call can definitely give it a shot. Try it out. We will advise you. We will continuously send you reports of anything that is showing up. We'll give you a clean bill of health if nothing is showing up on the dark web. But more than likely, there is something. Again, we have, and then after that, there is a discount. So dark web monitoring, thank you very much, Katie and Will. They are the leading dark web monitoring platform in the industry, and they scan and scour all areas of the dark web looking for your domain credentials. Katie, do you mind taking any questions before we wrap up? Because I saw a few questions come in.
No problem, Ian. That is exactly where things were headed at the end of the call here. Hey,
Okay.
Will, I might need some help answering these questions that came through. The first one that I am seeing here: can personal emails also be monitored?
So yeah, the answer to the question is absolutely yes. So the way that the tool works is we'll take your domain for your business, put it into the tool, and then every email account that's associated with that domain is automatically monitored. Now, personal email addresses. So if you have a Yahoo, AOL, Gmail, something that's personal that you'd like to monitor as well, just as an additional layer of security, to make sure that there's no compromises there also, so that can't potentially be used as a leverage to get into the business side of things. That is available as well. For each domain that or organization that's put under monitoring, you can monitor up to 5 personal email addresses. So yes, the answer is we can definitely do that as well.
Thanks, Will. And I'll go ahead and I'll take this next question that I saw come through. Should I be worried about additional exposures on the dark web after having my domain scanned? Within the short answer, no, but I'll provide a little bit of context around that as well. The data that we're pulling is considered publicly available information. Even though you do need to have special connection to access the dark web, anybody that wants to go through those necessary steps to find the information that our system is reporting on. Our team of analysts who find this information do not know who, clients are. They are pulling in credible, exposed information from the dark web and not placing it out there or using the data for any other purpose. As I'm scrolling through here, Will, it does look like we have one last question that popped up, and it is, how does dark web ID help protect my organization?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question, and we can expand on that just a little bit. So, we talked about during the presentation a little bit that we can give you a notice when your credentials go for sale on the dark web, and it allows you to get into a position where once you're aware of that, you can pivot out and get proactive at that point and do something about changing those passwords. And kind of a little bit deeper dive into where we're getting this information. Within the tool, we do have two collection methods. We do have some automated or server-based resources that are out in the dark web, and they're scouring, botnets, chat rooms, websites, bulletin boards, peer-to-peer networks, forums, just all kinds of different areas where criminals are trafficking in this information. Then we also have a team of human analysts that are in the dark web, and they're working on a daily basis. And they're going places where you just can't automate the collection of information. So maybe you have to do something to prove that you're a real person. You have to read and then go to a different location. It just requires some human interaction. So we have that team in place as well. And kind of the culmination of all this information they're bringing back again is a database that we can query for entries that correspond with your domain, and give you that early warning or that early heads up that you have compromised credentials and you need to do something about them.
Hi, Will. It's Ian here. I have a couple questions on this side. One of our clients could not make the webinar today, but he did fire a couple questions at me. And one
Okay.
is in terms of when a third party site gets breached and my corporate credentials are on that third party site that's been breached. How long does it usually take until you start seeing those emails on the dark web? Is it immediate? You'll see it, or do some of the bad actors, they might sit there and wait for weeks, months, or even years before it appears on the dark web? Is there any information on that?
Yeah, and you're right on the mark there, Ian. It really depends a great deal on who has the information. There are, it's Wawa is a convenience store is probably a great example. We know that they had a breach, and it's been months ago that they had a breach, and we know that credit card information is compromised in that breach, but it hasn't appeared, or it hadn't appeared. It's on the way on the dark web yet, even though we know that it's out there. For whatever reason, the criminals have held on to that information. They may want some time to kind of cover their tracks. They may have wanted to attempt to use some of that information on their own before they come to sell it. But we are starting to see chatter on the dark web that information is coming. So to your point, it really does depend on who the bad actor is that has the information and what their intention is. Sometimes you will see it come to the dark web fairly quickly, within just a matter of days, and sometimes they do hold on to it for weeks and sometimes months before they come to market, if you will, and try to sell that information.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for letting me know about that. The other question is, we do send reports to our clients that already are using the service. And in the report, sometimes we'll see compromised email address with the full password of that person. In other cases, we will see an encrypted, well, a bunch of letters and symbols. We're going to say that's encrypted. And in some cases, we don't see any passwords at all. So, do you know why? Is there any reason why it's just inconsistent with what we're seeing on the report?
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of the reasons why I would say, people will sometimes say, "Hey, send me the report. Let me take a look at it, and then I'll get back to you about the service." And it really does behoove the person to have somebody come out and talk about the report with them that knows what they're looking at. Because as you look down a report, just like you're talking about, Ian, you'll see some different results there, and it does look a little inconsistent and it's a little murky as to what's going on. But one of the things to keep in mind, and we alluded to this very briefly, is there's kind of two different groups of actors in the space. You'll have one group of people that are there and they're in community. They're sharing information. They're not really looking to profit from it. They just want to spread it around and let their fellow bad actors, if you will, have access to what they have access to. Others are there to sell. They want to make money. They want to make profit off what they've done. And so the way that these two groups present information is going to be different. So people that are sharing, you'll see passwords typically that are presented in full plain text. People that are there to sell and make money often will present the password as a blank. They won't tell you what the password is. And their messaging is, "Hey, pay me and I'll tell you what the password is." And sometimes you'll see that random looking group of characters that you described, which is actually a hashed value. Some people will refer to it as encrypted, but it's a hashed value. And again, the messaging is, "Hey, I've got this password, pay me and I'll tell you how to reverse this hash, and you can have the information that you want." So it really takes not a PhD, but it does take a little bit of understanding, a little bit of guidance on how to interpret these results, and then they make a lot more sense as you look at the reports.
Okay. And just one last question, a question that we do receive. Okay, what happens if our credentials are compromised and they are on the dark web? What should we do as an organization to protect ourselves? A couple of things that we recommend all the time is have strong password policy. Don't have those basic password as your password or the name of your pet or your partner with a few symbols, because we know hackers can break those within seconds. And the other thing too is two-factor authentication. So just add additional levels of security in order to get into your own personal accounts, your social media accounts, your Office 365, your G Suite, and all your mission critical accounts. Is there anything else that you and Katie can offer from ID Agent in terms of what a company should do in the event that their credentials are on the dark web?
Yeah. One thing I would mention is certainly understand the dark web. There's not a way that we can remediate the exposure. So we can't, request that the information be removed. We can't go take it down ourselves. There's nothing we can do. It's out there. So with that understanding, in mind, kind of equipped with that, you need to understand that those passwords are gone forever. So if you've got a password you like, and to your point, Ian, maybe it's your dog's name, you can't put 123 behind it and all of a sudden it's a new password and it's okay. We can proceed with that. As we've kind of talked about a little bit here today as well, there are tools that allow the bad actors to guess that in an automated fashion. So in talking to our developers before, I've heard them say that if you put an exclamation point behind a password, that's the same password. If you put 123 behind it, for all intents and purposes, it's the same password. So I would say step one is understand the space, understand, what's going on with the passwords and that they're compromised now, and they're going to be compromised forever. Another misconception that I've heard is people will go back to a password. Maybe they know it's compromised. It's been a year since it was compromised, so maybe the coast is clear. I can come back to it now, and that's absolutely not the case. It's still out there. People still have it. People will still try it. So that understanding, in my opinion, is step one. And then to your point, again, step two is, let's talk about good passwords. Let's talk about phrases, things like that, as part of our standard for how we want to approach things. And then the coupled with that is monitoring. So we've got a great password. It's long, it's complex, it's a phrase. That's good. That's what we want. But we also want to have an indication of compromise so that we know when that password is no good anymore and we need to move on to something else. And that's what the dark web monitoring provides, is that indication of a compromise.
Okay. Okay, thank you guys very much. Katie and Will, I really appreciate that you're available to be on our webinar. I also would like
Yes,
to
thank you
thank
for the
Corey
opportunity.
Evans. Yeah, I would also like to thank Corey Evans and Sandra Viveris. They're from eTech, the marketing and webinar team, and they did a fantastic job of organizing everything and sending out all the invitations that all our attendees received. So I'd like to also thank all the attendees for joining the webinar today, and I hope it was valuable. Thank you very much.